Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into the world of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. You'll often see it abbreviated as ABT.
Mm.
Now, it's really important right from the start to understand this isn't the same group as the more famous Aryan Brotherhood from California.
Yeah, that's a absolutely crucial point. They share ideology, obviously, the white supremacist angle, and maybe that notorious reputation.
Right.
But the ABT, its roots, its main turf, that's firmly in the Texas prison system.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is really to break down the origins, what they actually do, their activities, and the pretty structured organization of this major white supremacist gang. It's both a prison and a street gang in Texas.
And we've pulled together quite a bit for this. Information from, the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, news reports going back years, academic work too.
Yeah, a good mix. And looking at a group like the ABT, it really gives you a stark look, doesn't it,
Mm.
into how things work inside prisons.
Oh, definitely. The dynamics there.
And also the wider picture of organized crime and, frankly, these extremist ideologies that are, well, still very much present.
It's a necessary look, even if it's disturbing.
Okay, let's unpack it then. Go right back to the beginning. Where did it start?
All right, so the ABT was set up in 1981. Our sources point to the East M Unit, a Texas prison.
1981.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like an offshoot of the California group.
Well, interestingly, no. It actually came about after Texas inmates asked to start a chapter, like a franchise,
Huh.
of the California Aryan Brotherhood, and they were told no.
So they were denied
Yeah.
and just started their own thing.
Pretty much that rejection kind of forced them to create their own uniquely Texan identity.
That's fascinating. So that denial was maybe a key moment. It pushed them in a different direction.
It seems like it.
Now, you mentioned the timing, the early 80s. That wasn't just random, was it? There were big changes happening in Texas prisons then.
Oh, huge shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had the desegregation of the prisons. And also, they dismantled this old system, the building tender system. Some people call them trustees. Basically, inmates who had some authority helped keep order.
Oh, okay. So taking that away must have really stirred things up.
Completely. It disrupted the established, even if informal, power structure, created this power vacuum.
And into that vacuum.
Well, as often happens in those situations, right? Race-based gangs were quick to step up, assert themselves, try and fill that void.
So among the white inmates, there were already smaller groups.
Yeah, gangs like the Aryan Society, Aryan Brothers, names like that pop up.
Okay.
And the sources say that most of these groups, they kind of came together unified in the early to mid-'80s.
And that became the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas.
That was the core of it, yeah. But not everyone joined. No, some held out. And those who didn't join this merger, they later became pretty important in forming a rival group.
Live a guess. The Aryan Circle.
Exactly, the AC. So right from the very start, you've got this split, this division,
Wow.
planting the seeds for, well, a lot of conflict down the line.
Conflict that came pretty quickly, it sounds like. The ABT didn't waste time making noise.
Not at all. The sources mention a really chilling number, 13 murders linked to the ABT in just 84 and 85.
Wow. 13 in 2 years, right after forming.
Yeah. It really shows the level of violence they brought into the system almost immediately.
Definitely established a reputation early on.
Absolutely. And that violence, unfortunately, became a defining thing for them. Their ideology, it's clearly documented, deeply rooted in white supremacy.
The belief that white people are superior.
Right. And neo-Nazism, too. So embracing Hitler's ideas, racial purity, anti-Semitism, all of that.
And groups like the ADL and SPLC, they take this very seriously.
They do. They class the ABT as one of the largest and one of the most violent neo-Nazi white supremacist prison gangs and organized criminal enterprises in the whole country.
And it's not just inside prison, is it? Their reach goes further.
Oh, much further. They're involved in serious organized crime outside the walls, too.
Like what kind of activities are we talking about mainly?
Well, the big ones you'd probably expect. Drug trafficking is huge for them.
Okay.
Murder, obviously. Extortion, robbery, theft, and increasingly identity theft seems to be part of their portfolio.
A diversified criminal portfolio.
You could put it that way, yeah.
And they're not just operating alone, are they? Remember reading about alliances?
That's right. They do form alliances, notably with the Gulf Cartel, primarily for drug trafficking.
Wait, the Gulf Cartel? That seems counterintuitive given their ideology.
It does, doesn't it? But it really highlights something key about organized crime.
Money talks.
Pretty much. Profit often outweighs ideology when there's enough money on the table. It also makes things complicated for law enforcement. You can't just look at these groups in simple racial terms.
Yeah, that alliance definitely blurs the lines. Pragmatism over prejudice, maybe.
When it suits them, yes. It seems that way.
Okay, let's talk about the conflicts. It sounds like the ABT's history is just packed with violence and gang wars.
It really is, marked by intense, often long-running feuds.
Was that just inevitable, given who they are and what they do, or were there specific triggers?
Well, the sources say their first major war was against a black gang, the Mandingo Warriors.
Okay.
And that conflict reportedly ended with the Mandingo Warriors being almost, the term used is exterminated within the Texas prison system.
Wow, that's brutal. Shows their ruthlessness early on.
Absolutely. A clear sign of their drive for dominance.
And then came the big one, the war with the Aryan Circle, the AC.
Yes, that's the major, long-standing one. The sources suggest it raged for about 8 years initially, like 1986 to 94.
8 years? That's a long time.
It is, with, intense periods and then maybe quieter spells, but constant tension.
And you mentioned earlier that split when the ABT first formed.
Mm-hmm.
That must have fueled it.
Undoubtedly, that initial rivalry just festered and exploded.
Did these internal wars, like the one with the AC, make them vulnerable? Did other gangs try to take advantage?
Oh, for sure. Periods of intense conflict, especially with another white gang, definitely create opportunities for others to challenge them or try to gain ground.
But it sounds like, despite all these wars, no one ever really managed to take the ABT down completely.
That seems to be the case, according to the sources. Despite numerous bloody conflicts, they've consistently held on to significant power within the Texas system.
Then you see these weird moments like peace treaties in the early 90s.
Yeah, there are reports of treaties, specifically with the Mexican mafia, and maybe surprisingly, even with the Aryan Circle for a time.
Temporary ceasefires, maybe?
Probably more like strategic pauses, less about real peace, more about, regrouping, focusing on other threats, or just conserving resources for a while. Tactical move.
Right, not lasting solutions.
Definitely not.
And then another war kicks off, this time with the Texas Mafia, the TM mid-90s.
Yes, around 95, 96. And that one seems to have had a pretty decisive outcome.
How so?
The TM ended up being parked system-wide.
Parked. What does that mean exactly?
It essentially means they were forbidden by the dominant prison powers, likely including the ABT exerting influence, from recruiting any new members within the Texas prison system.
Whoa, so that basically cripples their future growth.
Severely. It's a major blow to a gang's long-term survival and influence. Getting another gang parked like that was a huge display of the ABT's power inside.
A real demonstration of clout.
Absolutely. It effectively froze the TM's ability to expand. And just to note, that conflict with the Aryan Circle, it didn't end in 94. It flared up again in 98, and then another major war kicked off around 2015, and sources suggest that's basically ongoing.
So that rivalry is just deep-seated and keeps reigniting.
It seems incredibly persistent, yes.
Let's shift to some specific incidents and people. The sources give some pretty grim examples of the ABT's internal workings and violence.
They do. There are some stark cases.
Like the one with Virgil Barfield stabbing another member, Calvin Massey, 42 times.
Yes, that's a notorious one. And the fact it was caught on video.
Horrifying. And the reason? Massey got a tattoo too early. Before he was a full member.
Apparently, yes. He stood up the Constitution, as they put it, broke their internal rules about when you earn the right to wear the patch or associated tattoos.
42 times for a tattoo rule. That just shows the brutal enforcement.
It's an extreme illustration of their rigid code and the consequences for breaking it. Sends a powerful message internally, using fear to maintain control.
Then there's the case of Mark Anthony Stroman.
Ah, yes. Executed in 2011.
For that killing spree right after 9/11. He was targeting people he thought were Middle Eastern.
But they were actually of South Asian descent. A tragic case of mistaken identity fueled by hate.
And Stroman was an ABT member, right? Or had strong ties.
His affiliation definitely provides context for that extremist mindset, that lashing out based on perceived ethnicity. It shows how the ideology can spill out into horrific, real-world violence.
Just devastating consequences. And maybe one of the most disturbing cases mentioned is the murder of Breonna Taylor in 2006.
That one is particularly horrific, by former ABT members Dale Jamieson and Jennifer McClellan.
The details. Torture, sexual assault, and then how they disposed of her body in acid and a cement-filled tub in a river.
It's almost unimaginable depravity.
The convictions brought some justice,
Yeah.
but it just It highlights the absolute worst possibilities when this kind of ideology and violence takes hold.
Absolutely. It shows the violence isn't just contained within the gang or the prison. It spills out, destroying lives in the wider community in the most brutal ways. The fact they were former members also suggests the lasting impact.
Yeah, leaving the gang doesn't necessarily mean leaving the violence behind.
It seems not in some cases.
Okay, shifting slightly. What about Terry Sillers, the former ABT general arrested in 2012?
Right, after a police chase, he ended up cooperating with authorities.
A general turning. That must have been significant for law enforcement.
Oh, hugely valuable, potentially. Someone that high up.
Yeah,
Defecting can provide incredible intelligence.
like what kind of stuff?
Structure, communication methods, who's who, ongoing plots, weaknesses. A real look inside. He got a 10-year federal sentence for his cooperation.
Still, a risky move for him personally, I imagine.
Extremely risky within that world, yes.
And finally, that big federal crackdown in 2018. Sounds like a major operation.
It was described as the nation's largest prosecution targeting white supremacist gang affiliates. Over 50 people indicted and convicted from various groups, including the ABT.
And they seized a lot, too. Drugs, money, guns.
Significant amounts of meth, cash, and firearms, yes. It showed the scale of their criminal enterprises.
A clear effort by law enforcement to hit them hard.
Definitely a coordinated push to disrupt their operations, at least temporarily.
Okay, let's talk about how the ABT is actually structured. It sounds surprisingly, almost formally organized.
It is quite hierarchical. At the top, you've got what they call the steering committee, or sometimes the wheel.
The wheel.
Yeah, it's made up of 5 generals. Each general is in charge of a specific geographic region of Texas.
5 regions, 5 generals.
Okay.
And then below each general, you have more structure. There's an inside major.
For the prisons in that region.
Exactly. Managing things within the prison units. And then an outside major who handles the gang's business in the cities and towns in that general's region.
And both majors report up to their general.
Correct. It's a clear chain of command.
And it goes down even further.
Yes. Within the prison units, the inside major appoints captains.
Okay.
And the captains appoint lieutenants. That's considered the lowest permanent rank.
Lieutenant. Got it.
Though in really large units or big cities on the outside, a lieutenant might appoint sergeants to help them manage things.
So captains, lieutenants, maybe sergeants. It's quite layered.
Very much so. It's a structure designed for, efficient communication, enforcing rules strictly, and coordinating their criminal activities, both inside prison and out.
Like a company, almost, but a criminal one.
It's a model you see in many established organized crime groups, that kind of hierarchy. All right, last piece. Membership. How many people are we talking about, and how do they recruit?
The numbers are estimates, obviously, but they're significant. Around 3,500 members is one figure often cited.
3,500. Mostly in Texas.
Primarily in Texas prisons, yeah, but also on the streets, and they have a presence in neighboring states like New Mexico and even in the federal prison system.
So they're not just contained to Texas state prisons.
No. An ATF estimate from 2012 put it around 2,600 in Texas prisons and maybe 180 in federal prisons back then. So the numbers fluctuate, but they have reach.
That's a lot of people involved. How do you become a member? Is it just signing up?
Oh, definitely not. There's a process. You start as a prospect.
A prospect, okay.
And while you're a prospect, you're technically under the ABT's protection, but you're also used for, well, the sources call it dirty work.
Meaning violence?
Usually, yes. Assaults, maybe even murders. You have to earn your bones, as they say.
Yeah.
Prove your loyalty and willingness to commit violence for the gang.
So it's a brutal initiation, basically designed to test commitment.
Exactly, a severe test. Only after proving yourself through action can you potentially become a full member, get your patch or tattoo.
Right, connecting back to that stabbing incident over the tattoo.
Precisely. It all ties into that rigid structure and code.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up, this deep dive into the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think first, it's clear they are a powerful, undeniably violent white supremacist gang.
And distinct from the California group, that's important.
Crucial distinction. Their history is long, bloody, and deeply tied to the Texas prison system, but extends far beyond it.
They're involved in a whole range of crimes, from drug running to murder to identity theft.
Right. And they operate with this surprisingly complex hierarchical structure with a significant membership base.
Inside and outside prison walls.
Exactly. They represent this ongoing challenge, right? For law enforcement, dealing with the intersection of racial extremism and organized crime. Their history of wars, both internal, like with the AC, and external, just shows this constant instability and struggle for power.
Yeah. So thinking about all that, the history, the structure, the violence, the ideology, it leads to a final thought, maybe.
Hmm.
We talked about that big federal crackdown in 2018. Seems like a major hit.
It was significant, yeah. Lots of arrests, seizures.
But you look at the history, these cycles of conflict, the way they seem to persist,
Hmm.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the real long-term impact of operations like that?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Can law enforcement strategies, even big ones, permanently dismantle or curb the influence of a group like the ABT, given how deeply embedded they seem to be? Or do they just adapt and endure?
A sobering thought. How effective are these crackdowns in the long run against such persistent, adaptable organizations? It's something definitely worth considering.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.